Hi there guys, welcome to another tutorial on our YouTube. So one of the things that we get asked for so many times on our DMs, on Instagram, everywhere, is please will you have this available as a PDF? And the answer is always no, because as you know, most of our kits combine partly painted and partly stitched elements there. So it's always really difficult to actually say yes to creating that as a PDF because most of it is filled in around a painting, and so we can't recreate that for you to transfer onto fabric by yourself. So because we get asked so much, and we were like, actually maybe we could challenge ourselves, I can't even speak, maybe we could challenge ourselves, maybe we could create this as a PDF. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this incredible original painting of Davinder's. This was my starting point and inspiration, and then I have taken the flowers and I've created that big bold flower is now appearing here and the other one just down here. I've reduced the scale a little bit. I've marked up a sketch, and that is going to be your PDF design. I've added a little bee because I just think bees are so fun to stitch and they add so much interest to an embroidery, and it's really nice to have that as a little feature. And then we're going to just really go for it with all of the colours to create this big bloom here and the smaller flowers, which I was inspired to do from these smaller elements here in the original painting. So I think we can do this. Follow along and see what you think, and if you want the PDF, it will be available for you to download from our website. So I've got my design on fabric. I've used a really beautiful fine linen that I just happen to have in the cupboard. I have double backed it with a couple of layers of muslin because I just wanted it to be nice and firm, and I didn't want threads, sort of strands showing in the back of the design. So I've got this, I've got all of my colours. This is a lot of colours. Obviously I won't use all of them, but I am trying to capture the colours in the artwork. So I've just brought out anything that I see colour-wise in the artwork. I'll be looking at that just for a bit of inspiration. It's not going to be a copy of this, it's just going to be there as a reference point, and hopefully we'll have something really beautiful at the end. So I'm going to start this design by doing one of the simpler elements first. I just thought I would start with the leaves here and here, just because it just means it starts to fill up the canvas fairly quickly early on, because I know that this flower is going to be full on, a lot of work. So I just thought it would be fun to get some of the staple elements in quickly. I've separated the thread, so I'm using a DMC 520 DMC thread, and DMC thread is 6 strands, and I always like to separate the strands so that I'm using 2 or 3 strands, and always wrap your other separate bit and just keep it to one side, keep that safe so you don't lose it. So we're going to go into this area first. So I've got my needle thread. I'm going to just pop a little knot on the end of my thread. I don't really care about knots underneath the work. No one is going to see. So those that tell you don't have knots, ignore them. Just make your life easy. So I'm starting at the bottom of the stem, and I'm just going to do a little, I'm actually going to do that little split stitch. So you want to just go back slightly into the previous stitch and then go in again. I like to use my fingers to guide the thread slightly into the previous stitch, only by a few millimeters, then into the next. And we're just going to work up the stem. You don't have to use a little split stitch. If you don't want to, you can just do a little back stitch. So see how I'm just going a fraction into that previous stitch as you do that little split stitch. It's a really effective way, and it does look a little bit elevated compared to just a back stitch or a running stitch. And I'm also satin stitching every leaf on this particular piece of foliage, and you'll notice that I've ran a running stitch around the leaf shape and then I fill with satin stitch. And you may wonder, what is the point of doing this? Well, it just adds a really beautiful structure to your satin stitch, and it's really worth the work because then you get a nicer edge and it just gives a slight raise on it. So do that running stitch around all of the leaves before you begin to fill with satin stitch. It's completely worth the effort. Then we move on to the other stems. So you'll notice that I'm just trying to put in all of the green foliage before I do any of the fun stuff. Not that the green is not fun, but I just think this is kind of like putting the basics down in the design. And once you've got your basics with your green, it will start to take shape as you add flowers. So we're just doing a split stitch again all the way up the stem, but the stem is quite wide this time, so we're just going to do it back and forth up to the top and then come back down and then go back up again. So take your time with it, although this is speeded up just so that you don't have to sit and watch all of it. But in this lighter green colour, it just looks really effective. And then we're just going to come all the way back down again. Then you are just going to add a small satin stitch at the base of that flower. This is the little part of the flower that would have once been part of the bud that's opened up to create that beautiful bloom that comes from the stem. Then we're just using this lovely sage green colour to stitch the final little leaf motifs, and we've got a central line to follow. So just do that satin stitch and make sure you do the back stitch around the outside. This is one of our favourite parts of this design, stitching the little bumblebee. This is a feature that we just love adding to some of our embroidery kits, so we had to add it to this PDF. So you'll see that I'm just stitching around the base with a back stitch, and then we're just going to do a satin stitch across the bottom of the bee. I'm just going to fill in on every other section of the stripe of the bee. You're using 3 strands of embroidery thread. Just remember that when you stitch with embroidery thread, it's made up of 6 strands, and we want to split the thread and just use 3 strands for the bee. So as you can see, it comes together really nicely. Put all of the other yellow into place, and then you're going to move on to the black. Then you'll stitch the black in between, and then we'll come on to some of the rest of the features. Now it comes to the fine detail of stitching the bumblebee's legs. So I'm looking back at my PDF design and figuring out just where I want to place them. I haven't drawn them out on the linen with the pen because I just wanted to have that ability to just sort of eye up with my needle and just get it in the right place without having a black line on the canvas, and it kind of, I felt like it would put me off making the placement just right. So we're just using that one strand of your DMC in the black just to make those tiny fine little bumblebee legs. So we're getting about 4 tiny little stitches here to create that length of the leg as the bumblebee is in flight. So just finely stitch it. As you can see, you just make a few adjustments if you need to, and then I'm just going to kind of go back in at the top just to make it a little bit thicker just at the top of the bee's leg, and it just adds that thickness that we need. So you'll do the rest of the legs and the antennae in the exact same way, and I just think using just the one strand is so effective. Then you just want to stitch the grey thread. You've just got 3 strands to create the little bumblebee's wings. It's pretty simple to just do this little area. Just do a satin stitch. You don't need to backstitch around the outside of the wing on this occasion, because that kind of slightly uneven edge works actually really well to create that wing. Now we have finally got to the flowers. So these flowers have got a yellow centre, and then the outside edge is stitched with a white thread, and then we've just got some French knots that we're going to add in the middle. So if you're not so sure about French knots, just keep re-watching and rewinding the section as we get to it. But for now we're just adding the highlight of the centre of the flower with this yellow. You can choose to do these flowers any colour you want actually, but we've chosen this pop of yellow, and it almost kind of looks daisy-like when the white is added. So just work your way around. We've speeded this up just so that you can follow along quickly, and then we're just adding the white. As you can see, I've done a back stitch around the outside of the flower, and then we're just filling it in. And remember that back stitch is just a really good part of your stitching. It's like the undergarment of satin stitch, and it will really help you to get a lovely smooth finish on your flower. So just keep going, adding that satin stitch to create your beautiful little blooms. Now we're coming to the part where we're going to add some French knots. So a French knot is literally wrapping around the needle and going back into the place pretty much next to where you came up with your needle. So you're going to come through with your needle, wrap your thread around the needle a couple of times, and then just go back in. Let's watch it slowly. 1, 2, and then back in to the place. Hold it gently with your finger and just guide that thread through with a spare finger. We're going to add about 4 or 5 or 6 French knots depending on how it goes, and then we're just going to take one strand of fine brown thread and we're just going to add a little bit of a highlight around the outside, and it just adds a bit of light and shade and tone to the center of that flower. It just gives it some depth, and it's a really successful way to add that depth with a small fine strand of thread. Now we have reached the really special part of this embroidery design, which is to stitch this gorgeous big floral that is really the star of this design, I would say. So we're going to do a satin stitch in every little section of the petals, and you'll notice that we've just used such a variety of colours in the tones of dark pinks and oranges, and it's just really fun to build up the colours here. So just keep going with your satin stitch, and don't forget to outline with backstitch, because that really does help you to build that structure of the flower. Now we are on to the fun part of this flower. If you didn't love French knots before, you're going to love them after this, because you're going to have to do an awful lot of French knots on this design. And you're just going to work your way all around the outside and just keep filling the whole center of the flower till it's completely filled with French knots. So as you can see, I'm doing 3 wraps of the needle on this French knot, and you're just going to guide it through really carefully. We'll speed it up because this is going to take a little while to fill this whole space. But if you're a bit unsure about French knots, just rewind and keep watching, and we also have posted lots of close-ups on our Instagram so you can see the technique there. Let's go slow. 1, 2, 3, and then we're just going to drop in. Just guide it through with your finger just to make sure that it's secure and you don't get a terrible knot happening, which is actually very easy. But if that happens, just cut the thread and just go again. Don't worry too much about it. So you're going to stitch the pink flower, which is a little bit smaller, in the same way with lots of different highlights of shades. So this one is definitely more pinky in our design, so we've used like a dark pink and then a kind of fuchsia pink and this sort of pale kind of colour, this sort of neutral and almost like ballet slipper pink, I want to call it. So you're just going to fill up all of the petals, and then you'll do French knots in the centre in just the same way as we did in the larger bloom, and just enjoy the process of building up this gorgeous flower. And don't be afraid to use darker shades like that maroon burgundy colour and the sort of brown sort of, I don't know what kind of colour you would call it, like a sandy sort of brown colour. Don't be afraid to use those colours within your flower, because it just adds a sophistication and a less obvious choice of colour. You might want to do these flowers in completely different shades. You may even want to do them in blues or vibrant reds, or yellows and brighter oranges, or variegated thread you might want to use. So just go for it, make it your own. But again, all of the colours are listed in the guide, so if you need any advice on colour choices, you can follow the pattern to the exact. So add your French knots, and then this flower is almost complete. For this yellow flower, we've used 3 different shades of yellow. One of them is a real lemony tone of yellow, and then a slightly deeper one. It's the same yellow that we used for the centre of the white flowers and in the bumblebee, and then just a brighter, sort of more sunshine yellow. It just adds a dimension to the flower. And we've also used a little bit of that brown, just as a dirty kind of highlight underneath, where sometimes the flower is just sort of dying back a little bit, and it just adds depth and shadow. Again, do your French knots. We've got this lovely green colour which we've used for the stem as well, and it just has a real kind of buttercup look to it, and it's really effective. So just do the smaller flower, and then you are almost done with this design. When you have finished your embroidery design, you want to trim around the linen fabric. You want to just leave about 4 centimeters around the outside, and then just take a plain colour, probably the white thread if you have it, and just do a running stitch around the outside of the fabric. It doesn't have to be super neat, you just want to take it all the way around, and then you're going to draw it in. It's like a gathering stitch basically. Pull it in really tight when you've got this done, and then you're just going to do a really strong back stitch at the end to finish it off, and then your embroidery kit is all finished. Make sure that is nice and secure, and there you have it. You've got your finished design, this beautiful artist's bloom floral PDF. We really hope you've enjoyed stitching this, and look out for other products that we're going to release with this launch. Thanks for watching.